Caroline Flint's statement earlier on, Labour welcomes this plan to build at Hinkley.
Well, I think it's important that nuclear is part of our long-term diverse energy mix, and that's very important because when, as npower have done today, companies put their prices up, they partly anyway say that's because of the wholesale costs are going up, and the wholesale costs largely gas, and to have a diverse mix so you're not overly reliant on gas is important, not just although this is important for carbon emissions reasons, but also in terms of having a balanced supply. So for those reasons we support new nuclear being part of the mix. Obviously we'll have to interrogate in some degree of detail the conditions around this deal that's been announced today. There are obviously still some hurdles to get over in terms of state aid and other things, but it does highlight, I think, why we need to ensure that the retail market is fair, transparent and clear, because it is on people's bills that these costs will be added, and people need to understand why they're paying what they're paying.
Is this a good deal, Hinkley?
Well, I haven't seen the exact details of all the details and all the conditions. I mean, I think we have to look at that in a great deal of detail. We've asked, when the energy bill was going through Parliament last year, to ensure that the scrutiny is there, because we want to make sure that we're not overpaying for a new power station at Hinkley. But it is important to have new nuclear as part of that energy mix.
We heard earlier on from somebody who used to work there of Gordon Brown selling off BNFL.
Well, look, we've in a position
to Japan for $4 billion.
Where we've had over a long period of time a lack of investment in generation capacity in the UK. That's something which is becoming now increasingly urgent that is addressed, and we support, and we've said all the way through and including at our conference a few weeks ago, that we support having a long-term decarbonisation target and using the contracts for difference mechanism, which has come through in the energy bill, to encourage and to support that investment happening. That's, by the way, much more important than any issues around short-term price freezes, is about having the long-term framework right. And so, we support using contracts for difference. We support new nuclear being part of the mix. We'll have to just reserve some judgment on the exact detail of the deal until we've had the chance to scrutinise it properly.
And Adam will address the npower issue in just a second, but let's listen to what Ed Davey, the Secretary of State, said about your leader's plans for energy. He said this earlier on to us.
What you're doing here is making sure you can get that investment in at an affordable price, and by making sure that they carry the risks, we've really protected the consumer. The reason why the Leader of the Opposition's policy is a real con is because he's not saying what happens after the 20-month price freeze is over. We all know that energy bills will then rocket. Energy companies will make up for what they've lost, and the bills will go up massively afterwards. So it is a con from Ed Miliband and the Labour Party. They're not dealing with the real issues here, which is trying to make sure we have a more competitive electricity and gas industry. We inherited from them the Big Six. Labour created the Big Six, but thanks to coalition policies, we've now got 8 independent energy suppliers competing with the Big Six. So if people are fed up of these rises from the Big Six, they've now got a choice, and that's thanks to the coalition, not to Labour.
Okay, what about if the prices go up just timed impeccably by the Big Six before your price freeze, and so people are paying, too much?
Well, I think if Ed Davey isn't aware of what we're saying would happen afterwards, then he's obviously not been listening, because we've made very clear that the price freeze is for a specific defined fixed period while we make changes to the retail market to make sure it's clear and transparent and fair, because the companies generate the power they sell to themselves. A lot of that's done secretly. We need that to be completely open and transparent, and that's indeed something even some of the right-wing press this weekend were calling for. They're catching up with the reality that the market isn't working for consumers, and in the long term doesn't work for the companies either, because people don't trust those companies. So that's what needs to happen. And then afterwards we'd be in a situation where we'd have a much tougher regulator that's able to ensure that if the companies are not passing on price reductions when they happen, that they're forced to do so. Now that is about fairness and transparency and clarity in that market, which is vitally important. The government have so far refused to do it. I think actually if they were really serious about making sure that the energy market works better, they would get on and swallow their pride and take on the points that we've been making.
On the npower point, Adam, just let's address that briefly before we go to the travel news and then take the calls.
Well, let's quote Paul Basara, the Chief Executive of npower, says, "We understand that the Labour Party's proposed price freeze may appear superficially attractive. It won't lead to lower sustainable prices. It doesn't cost the growing cost of supplying energy. 16% of the bill is under our control. Price controls discourage investment, increase uncertainty and lead to higher prices. He basically says you've got it completely wrong.
Well, look, he says it's discouraging investment on the day when an investment is announced. I think people can draw their own conclusions.
Oh yeah, hold on.
That.
But that investment is coming from a French basically state-owned company who are vast and can be much bigger than any of our ones, because basically our big six, none of them domestically are big enough to build a construction like this.
Well, I would argue with that in relation to Centrica, but just the point is that this is being done through the contracts for difference, which we support, which is actually what's more important in terms of getting investment is the long-term signals, and that's why a decarbonisation target and those contracts for difference mechanisms are important. I just frankly do not accept that a short-term price freeze while we fix the broken bit of the retail market is going to stop investment happening.
I do understand why
Paul Massara is critical of it, because he doesn't like the idea of prices being frozen whilst those things are changed. But actually it's in his company's interests in the long run to have a fair and transparent market, because people don't trust their companies. Empower customers don't trust Empower. Actually, if they want to have a sustainable future, they need to be able to. That's what those changes to the retail market will deliver.
Why can't you think and plan what you're going to do about energy prices now and then impose it on day one of coming into government?
Well, look, we set out our plans at conference deliberately, not just before an election, but the period ahead of an election, to make sure that we get those plans to reform the retail market dealt with properly, so people understand exactly what we're doing and why we're doing it, because that's vitally important. We can't have a situation where there is demand for investment because our generation capacity is largely going offline in the next few years, that ends up being on people's bills, because it's consumers that will end up paying, if people don't have trust and don't understand why they're paying what they're paying in their bills. And why is it that when the wholesale prices go up, then your bills go up and my bills go up? When the wholesale prices reduce, that isn't passed on in the same way. There's a fundamental unfairness there that needs to be properly fixed.
EDF say that is a complete myth and that there is no evidence that well-worn cliche is true.
Well, look at 2008, wholesale prices went up, bills came up. 2009, wholesale prices reduced by about 45%, average bill came down about 5% during that period, and that additional margin has stayed within that market, hasn't been corrected since.
They have a little graph on their release here, which they says tracks retail costs and wholesale gas costs, and I'm just quoting them. There are many myths, including the entirely unproven suggestion, and they say that they have an independent analysis that says the evidence is unconvincing.
Well, look, my figures come from the figures that provided to Ofgem by the companies. Indeed, they were when the companies were forced to provide that information. That's very clear and on the record, and it's available for everyone to see. That has been the case over the past few years. We need to have a situation though where there's real clarity and transparency in that market, so people know why they're paying what they're paying. We haven't got that now. That needs to be fixed, because otherwise people aren't going to have confidence in the reason why we're paying for investments like the one announced this morning.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Greatrex.